Welcome to Nobody Told Me. I'm Jan Black.
And I'm Laura Owens.
And we are very excited to welcome Sandra Joseph to the show today. Sandra holds the record for being the longest-running female star on Broadway, having played the role of Christine in Phantom of the Opera 1,300 times, 6 nights a week for nearly a decade.
And Sandra has an inspiring story to share, and she's the author of the book Unmasking What Matters, 10 Life Lessons from 10 Years on Broadway. Sandra, thank you so much for joining us today. It's an honor to talk with you.
Oh, thank you so much, Jan and Laura. I'm thrilled to be here. Thanks for having me.
So you got the role of a lifetime playing Christine in Phantom of the Opera after auditioning 3 times for the role. And yet I was so surprised to hear that you have always struggled with extreme stage fright. So how did that all happen?
Yes, I'm the least likely person to end up being on Broadway, much less being the longest leading lady on Broadway, because I was paralyzed by stage fright for years and years. I mean, I bailed on doing the first solo I was ever given in the 5th grade. Moments before the concert started, I saw the crowd and panicked and got out of it, had someone else do it for me. It really was a battle from the start between really love and fear. It's the age-old battle we all face in some way in our lives. And for me, it happened to be about this thing, this art form that I felt pulled toward. And at the same time, it felt like the most terrifying thing in the world for me. So that struggle was on from the get-go.
And how did you overcome it?
You know, I really feel like the struggles that we face toward our own blossoming, whatever that might look like, it's kind of what helps us come out of our shell. The love was a little bit stronger, as love always is, than the fear. I mean, ultimately, that's what it came down to. Of course, I started training, building my skill set in order to build my confidence. But it really was one baby step after another toward the goal of simply being able to stand in front of people and sing and act. I was not thinking for a very long time that I would try to do it professionally. It was a huge milestone for me to be able to do a high school show. Mm-hmm. And that was when I finally got started, was in high school, and I continued studying in college. And eventually I did decide to take the big, crazy risk of moving to New York City and trying to make a go of it for real.
In the book, you talk about how important it is to reject and shed mistaken identities. So is that kind of what you did in order to become that confident Broadway performer?
You know, I do think that we have to let go of the idea that we can't. You know, that was a huge obstacle for me, was who do I think I am? Nobody like me is ever going to be able to do something like that. And that was sort of a mask I was wearing, a false identity of fear. And the fears that we have, they can hold us back from going after our dreams, but they don't have to. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of propelling ourselves forward.
And daily work, daily practice.
Daily. And it's ongoing, because if we're growing and evolving, we're continuing to do things that put us on our edge. So for me, it's been a spiritual practice, really, to keep moving through the fear and expressing what it is that I want to express while I'm on this earth. I mean, it really comes down to that.
When you were on Broadway in the role of Christine, how did you keep your performances fresh and alive every time?
It's such a great question. You know, 6 nights a week doing the same songs, the same scenes, the same choreography, it does get to be like a recurring dream, you know, like the movie Groundhog Day. Didn't we?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And again, the practices from my life helped me on stage and vice versa. So the same thing we all have heard so much about now, mindfulness, being present, being in the now, that's what I had to do and train myself to do and practice every single night. It's our job when we're out there on stage to make the audience believe this is all happening for the first and only time. So it's a trick of the mind, really, to get ourselves to recognize, just as this breath right now that we're each taking is the first and only time we're going to take this breath, to be present to it brings it alive. But it's very easy to go on autopilot, and then the performance becomes flat and dead, and the audience can feel that. So similarly, in my life, I try to practice the same thing of how can I stay aware of the fact that this day is the only one of its kind. And even if I'm doing the same stuff that I did yesterday, there's a freshness to it if I tune the instrument of my attention in the right way.
In the book, you talk a lot about meditation, specifically LKM or Lovingkindness meditation, and you do that every day. I absolutely loved what you had to say about it and wondered if you could tell our audience a little bit about what that is.
Oh, thank you so much for asking. It's such an important practice for me personally, and I think it's just a really useful one for everyone. So Lovingkindness meditation it's a traditional practice, but you can update it and make it work for you and put your own spin on it any way you like. But it's basically thinking of a number of different people. You can start with yourself, or often people find it easier to sort of warm up their heart by thinking about someone that you love and simply wishing them well. So I'll tell you my latest spin on it, which is not in the book because this is a recent development. I've started listening to an inspirational song every morning while I do my Lovingkindness meditation. So I have just an extra layer of emotional resonance going on, and I simply think through the people I love, and then you can expand it out to people maybe you're having a hard time with, or then people you don't even know, and eventually you can send loving kindness to all living beings. But the important thing, too, is to include oneself and to simply wish the person well from your heart to theirs. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you be free from harm and suffering. May you live with ease and joy. It warms up your own heart and fills you with positivity so that you start the day from this place where you're filled with love. And the research shows that simply doing loving kindness meditation actually increases well-being and happiness. So it's a useful practice in so many ways.
Another thing you recommend is journaling. And tell us more about that and why you feel it's helpful and important.
I think it's so important, especially nowadays when we can be distracted constantly. There's always something vying for our attention. We need to check in with ourselves and slow down long enough to hear the wisdom from our own hearts and to question, where am I? What's going on with me right now? What is my heart wanting? What needs my attention right now so that we can hear our own dreams and desires and know how to take care of ourselves. I go on a retreat every chance I get, which is not as often as I would like, but time away from our regular routine is so often where we get those downloads, where we hear our inner voice. And I do believe that when we take direction from our inner guidance, then we're led in the right direction where we can be of service in the world.
And, I always do gratitude journaling every single night, but I added that loving kindness meditation last night rather than doing it in the morning. And I found that I had a better night's sleep and I had better dreams because I was thinking positive thoughts before. So I think that's also a good time of the day to try it.
That's wonderful. Yes, I love bookending my day with gratitude and positivity, morning and night. And then, whatever goes on in the chaos of the middle, at least you've got those two anchors to set your mind right and your heart. And I heard your wonderful conversation with Sean Acor, and he talks so much about the importance of gratitude and gratitude journaling and remembering not only to think about or write down what we're grateful for, but why we're grateful for it as well. During loving kindness practice, it's also a wonderful technique to think about the qualities of the people that you love and what it is that you love about them. It's like putting a smile in your cells.
And during your time in Phantom of the Opera as well, you also would write down what went right in your performances and what didn't. How did that help you?
Yeah. Well, the weird kind of glitch of the mind that we all have, of course, is the negativity bias, where we're wired evolutionarily to latch on to, like Teflon, to the negative, and like Velcro, rather, the negative, and Teflon for the positive. It's just goes right out of us.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was doing Phantom for so many years, you get down to the millimeter of difference between one performance and the next. And I was noticing how I would go home at the end of the night and beat myself up, just cataloging what didn't go perfectly, which note or syllable I didn't sing the way I wanted to, or which moment where my mind wandered, just really picking my performance apart. So to combat that, I gave myself the homework assignment of writing down 5 things I did well every night, just to balance the scales and stop my critical mind from sapping me of joy in what I was doing. We get to the goal, we can achieve a dream that seems out of reach and still find a way that we don't quite measure up, that we're not good enough. If we're looking for those things to criticize about ourselves, we will always find them.
How would you describe the connection you had with the Phantom cast over those 10 years? That must have been almost indescribable.
Yes, it really does become like a family. And, Phantom just this week celebrated its 13,000th performance. It's been running for 30 years on Broadway.
Wow.
$6 billion in revenue. It's actually not only the longest running Broadway show of all time, it is the most lucrative entertainment enterprise in history.
Wow.
There's something so special about that show, and it means so much to so many people. But for those of us in the cast, there certainly was a special bond. And I had one Phantom co-star in particular. People often want to know, did you have a favorite Phantom? Well, there was a gentleman who joined the cast when we played the Kennedy Center in Washington, D.C. on the national tour, named Ron Bomer. And he and I had really great chemistry on stage and off stage. And I married the Phantom. My husband, Ron, I took the best possible souvenir from my time at Phantom.
Yeah.
I love how in an interview with him, you talked about how even between your best and worst performances, the audience probably couldn't tell the difference. And I think that's so true in so many things that we do in life that we're passionate about. Even though we're being really critical of ourselves, most people wouldn't know that we're not doing our best.
Absolutely. To us, it can feel like the Grand Canyon, but to others, it's probably imperceptible. And I think so often we're striving for perfection, and the difference between good and great, while, to us, of course, it feels good sometimes. There's such a thing as healthy striving, but we can also just spin our wheels and make ourselves miserable with never enough, never enough. So I think it's good to take the pressure off of ourselves sometimes and recognize our best efforts are good enough, and we don't have to make ourselves crazy and exhausted.
How did you say goodbye to Phantom and to the role of Christine?
Oh, well, Christine is supposed to be a teenager, so the Emmy Rossum played Christine in the film version, and when she was cast in the role, she was 16. Now, I was not 16 when I was cast in the role, and I stayed for a decade, so tick-tock, it was time to go. And it really was a struggle for a while because I had no idea where I would go next. Where do you go from the dream job, the dream role? They say the higher you climb, the farther you fall. And the truth is, I had known for several years toward the end of my Phantom run that I felt complete with the whole Broadway journey, even though that was what I trained for, what I loved all my life, the only thing I knew. I felt this inner pull to go in some other direction. I had no idea what that would look like, but I had to admit it to myself that I felt like I wanted to wrap it up with a beautiful bow and vows of gratitude and find my second act in my own way. And it took quite a long time to figure that out.
And soon after you left Broadway, you had two major life events happen to you that really kind of threw you for a loop. What were those?
Yes. It was in the wake of leaving Phantom that my beloved father died suddenly of a heart attack, and I was diagnosed with a tumor on my brainstem, which threatened my ability to sing. It's connected to a nerve that controls my voice. So sudden loss and a terrifying diagnosis. These are the things, of course, that really get our attention and bring us to our knees. And it really did make me reevaluate everything and it shifted my entire way of being in the world, because I got it in a personal, visceral way. The fact that we are here for such a limited time and we have the right to live our lives in the way that is most meaningful to us. And I'm committed to doing that, no matter what that looked like.
So how would you describe this second act of your life after leaving Phantom?
I knew I wanted to use my voice in a way that could make an impact in a way that had nothing to do with playing a character. So I recognized that I wanted to say something that might be useful to other people and share my experience of struggle through my own fear and self-doubt. And eventually, over a long period of time, I found my way to speaking and writing a book. And now I'm a full-time keynote speaker who sings, and I don't know if there's any such thing, but that's what I'm doing. And it really is, to me, the most rewarding thing I have ever done. It was so scary for me to step out of a costume and a character and someone else's script and be myself on stage in front of people. It's one thing to be on stage in a tried and true musical, but to step out as just Sandra, that was a whole new level of vulnerability. And it's also where I know I'm meant to be. I really feel like my whole journey in Phantom was preparing me for the privilege of what I get to do now.
We have a broad audience that includes people who are starting new jobs or ending their career and don't really know what's ahead for them. And you've been such a beautiful example of how to embrace uncertainty. What advice would you have for other people who are starting a new chapter in their lives?
Thank you for asking that. You know, it's so easy, I think, to listen to these stories of, I can stand here now and say, I once was Christine in Phantom, and now I have this wonderful second career. Mm-hmm. What you don't see is the messy middle. Mm-hmm. And it was messy. Transitions are tricky. And, the caterpillar does not just turn into the butterfly. It dissolves into a gooey mess, a blob of goo, before it grows those wings and becomes a butterfly. So my best advice is to trust the process. Don't give up too soon. Be very kind and compassionate toward yourself, and patient. It did not happen for me overnight. It took, I went from making a lot of money to making no money, and then investing a lot of money in getting toward the next thing. And there were plenty of times when I thought, oh my gosh, I have made the biggest mistake. What was I thinking? I need to go do a different Broadway show or something. Finding my way took a lot of time and a lot of learning and perseverance. So I would encourage everyone listening to believe in what you know in your heart and not to give up too soon.
And not to really give into those little moments of panic that we all have where we do doubt that dream that we know is achievable.
Yes, absolutely. It is achievable. And it just sometimes calls on us to practice everything we've learned. It takes everything we can muster in terms of faith. It takes everything we can muster in terms of perseverance. It takes everything we can muster in terms of belief in ourselves and faith in something larger than us. But I do think we can tap into that power that is larger than us, that source that feels like it's calling you rather than you pushing the river. But when you're in the flow of your life, there's a sensation to it. There's a feeling to it. And when we follow that, I believe we're always led to where we're supposed to be.
As we've mentioned, the title of your book is Unmasking What Matters, 10 Life Lessons from 10 Years on Broadway. And one of the chapters is called Remember Your Curtain Call. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, so the year after I left Phantom, when my father died and I had this scary diagnosis, I was very aware of impermanence. And we can think of that in a morbid, depressing way, or we can think of it in a very practical, useful way, that our life has an expiration date. We don't know when that time will come. And I find that to be the most permission-granting fact, because when we are aware, and in Buddhist practices, there's actually a meditation on one's own death, like remembering that our time is limited, so that we are very conscious and mindful and intentional about how we choose to live every single day. So when we do remember that we only have a brief moment on the world stage, so it reminds us, let's play full out. Let's not play small. Let's not wait in the wings. Let's get about the business of being who we're here to be and not let fear or self-doubt hold us back from whatever that is.
But what if you don't really know who you're supposed to be? How do you recommend that people find their true passion, their real calling?
We all do know. Sometimes it just takes time to put language to it. And I think we can't always see the end of the journey. We don't necessarily have a picture of the final product. But if you listen to your heart, there will always be the next stepping stone on the path that you can see. So to focus just on taking that one next step. And you may have to course correct, but life is speaking to us all the time. So to follow one step on the path after another, and to be courageous about that. It's going to be a vulnerable ride for sure, but that vulnerability is what builds courage and enables us to really blossom into who we really are.
Who do you admire?
Oh, my goodness. I admire anybody who is willing to share their voice, to step outside of their own fear, their own self-doubt. I can give you names like Oprah, of
Sure.
course. I admire Oprah so completely, not having anything to do with her celebrity or her fame, but the human being that she is, how committed she is to being the best Oprah she can be. And when we see other women do that, it does give us permission to be the fullest expression of who we are. I admire Marianne Williamson. She's really putting herself on the line right now, running for president. And she's bold. And she gave us those wonderful words. Our greatest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our greatest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure.
I'm wondering what advice you would have for young performers.
Oh, my heart goes out to young performers because it's a difficult journey. The competition is intense. It can be incredibly demoralizing. They say it takes 50 to 100 no's before you get one yes. I mean, can you imagine going to that many job interviews and just hearing no, 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 no? It's difficult. But if it's what you love more than anything else, then you have to go for it and know that it's not personal when you get rejected. We all get rejected, and we all doubt our talent, and the archetype of the artist is feeling not good enough. So when those voices come up, I'm not good enough, just know that that's just part of the gig. Everybody has that voice in their head. And also that getting the thing that you think makes you good enough, that's not what makes you good enough. You're already good enough. It has nothing to do with getting to the thing. So I think when we hang our self-worth on externals, that's when we really get into trouble. When we think, oh, if I get that starring role, then I'll finally be good enough. That's not what it's about. Our dreams are there for us to exercise our courage and become more alive. And it often doesn't go our way. I mean, that's the fact of it. But my friend and the wonderful author, Mark Nepo, he has a beautiful quote that says, often our dreams don't come true, but sometimes we do. As we move toward our dreams, we learn to stand in our power and inhabit our truth. We become more courageous. We become more of who we are. And we end up getting something more valuable, more important. We get to be who we are. And that's what we're here for.
Sandra, you've given us so much amazing wisdom throughout this interview, but we have to ask you our signature question. What is your nobody told me lesson? So what is it that you wish someone had told you about being on Broadway, about being a performer, or just being a person that you wish they had?
Nobody told me that you can't achieve your way to being good enough. Nobody told me that you can't improve yourself to become worthy. You know, I feel like I've spent so much of my life on the journey to Phantom and beyond that, really running faster and faster on this treadmill of self-improvement, personal development, achieve, work harder, be the best. And if I'm honest, it was really in large part about trying to earn my right to exist, trying to prove that I was worthy of being here. And what I wish someone had told me is that you don't have to earn your right to be here because we were all born worthy. We all have a place at the table. It's a miracle to be born at all. And every person is born as a part of this invisible web of connection of humanity and of this earth. We all already belong. I wish that I had known I didn't have to run so fast and work so hard to try to feel like I was good enough. We're already worthy because we were born that way.
I feel that. I feel that so deep in my soul. That resonates with me so much. I love that.
Sandra, how can people connect with you on social media?
Oh, thank you for asking. I'm in all the usual places. You can find me on my website, sandrajoseph.com, and all the links are there for all the social stuff. And yeah, I would love to connect with people. Thank you.
Well, our thanks to Sandra Joseph, and her book is called Unmasking What Matters, 10 Life Lessons from 10 Years on Broadway. And again, as she mentioned, you can check out her website at sandrajoseph.com. I'm Laura Owens.
And I'm Jan Black.
And you've been listening to Nobody Told Me. Thanks so much for joining us.